स्वागत है आप सबका चर्चा इन ब्लैक होल में। और इस पॉडकास्ट में मितेश और मैंने मिलकर बात की है अभिनव चिकारा से। और अभिनव चिकारा ने जो कर रखा है उसकी लिस्ट काफ़ी लंबी है, बट शुरू करते हैं। अभिनव चिकारा इज को-ऑथर ऑफ द Amazon बेस्ट सेलर बुक पजामा प्रॉफिट, जिसमें उन्होंने फ्रीलांसिंग को ब्रेक डाउन कर रखा है। तो जब मणिपाल यूनिवर्सिटी में वो पढ़ रहे थे और उनके आसपास के बच्चे पास होने की कोशिश कर रहे थे, ही वॉज रनिंग हिज ओन एक्सपेरिमेंट विद हिज फ्रेंड्स एंड ही इवेंचुअली एंडेड अप डूइंग फ्रीलांस इन डिज़ाइन। और उसके बाद जब इंडियन स्टार्टअप्स फाइनली डिज़ाइन पे ध्यान देने लग गए, ही बिकेम पार्ट ऑफ द डिज़ाइन टीम ऑफ housing.com एंड ही इवेंचुअली बिकेम डिज़ाइन हेड ऑफ अन अकेडमी। और इतने बढ़िया स्टार्टअप्स में काम करने के बाद ही इवेंचुअली स्टार्टेड हिज ओन थिंग 10K डिज़ाइनर्स कोहोर्ट, जिसकी वजह से पिछले 3 साल में काफ़ी सारे लोग डिज़ाइन में अपना करियर स्टार्ट कर पाए। और उसके अलावा जो उनका यूट्यूब पे कंटेंट है, नॉट जस्ट अबाउट डिज़ाइन, एवरीथिंग, इट्स ग्रेट, यू शुड डेफिनेटली चेक इट आउट। तो हमने क्या बात की? हमने बात की डिज़ाइन की कि डिज़ाइन कैसे जगहों के साथ चेंज होता है और डिज़ाइन वेब3 के साथ कैसे चेंज हो रहा है। और इसके अलावा हमने बात की कि उनका बचपन कैसा बीता, उनका स्कूल वगैरह कैसा था, क्या इंडिया में सच्ची में अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ की कमी है। हमने बात की कि इंट्यूशन का क्या रोल है लाइफ में। और उसके अलावा हाउ हैविंग समथिंग एज अ पार्ट ऑफ योर आइडेंटिटी अ बैड थिंग। और अगर तुम्हें ये कॉन्वर्जेशन पसंद आए तो तुम्हें बाकी सारे कॉन्वर्जेशंस भी चेकआउट करने चाहिए और चर्चा इन ब्लैक होल को सब्सक्राइब कर देना चाहिए। वी रियली एंजॉयड दिस कॉन्वर्जेशन एंड आई होप यू विल डू। सो मेरे को डिज़ाइन वगैरह सबसे डिज़ाइन डाउ सबसे रिलेटेड क्वेश्चन पूछने, बट मुझे उससे पहले भी पूछना है, व्हाट्स योर ऑब्सेशन विद भेल?
Bro, being in Copenhagen, which is like literally the very far away from India, and मतलब यहाँ पे Indian चीजें मिलती भी नहीं है. For me, bhel is just like something that was very easily available पहले, and now it's like this rare thing जो India से मतलब महीनों में एक बार मंगानी पड़ती है, तो it's just that. Yeah.
पहले कैसे मिल रही थी भेल?
मतलब I was in Bangalore इससे पहले, right? I was in Bangalore, been in Bangalore for like maybe since 2002 till अभी मतलब till 2020. तो मतलब it was a normal thing. It was not a rare item, but now it's like a rare item, so it's just that. Yeah.
Because you did this like 21-day stream in like 2021 and I joined it, and in every live
Yeah.
stream there is a भेल break.
भेल ब्रेक
Yeah. Yeah.
और
मतलब
और
शुरू
मेरी
में तो I was actually eating bhel on that break, but eventually it just became the name for the break. Yeah.
But why specifically भेल? I mean, there are so many things you can get from India, right? So why specifically
Yeah.
भेल? What is unique about it?
बस थी घर पे bro. Like, you know, यहाँ पे I had received a package of Indian food.
Okay.
And that was the thing. So it just happened. Yeah.
Random.
Yeah.
मेरे को लगा था कि कॉलेज हॉस्टल वगैरह में ज़्यादा खाई होगी, तो लाइक नॉस्टैल्जिया टाइप की, लाइक ओके।
College में actually बिल्कुल भी नहीं खाई bro. Bhel was not a thing. Yeah.
How was
कॉलेज
hostel
में
like? What were you doing? Because
Chilling
जहाँ तक
bro.
हमें पता है freelancing and everything, that
Yeah.
logo designing and we're doing that
बट
in
लाइक
hostel.
व्हाट वर योर ऑफ डे लाइक मेस में खाना खा रहे हो, क्या क्या सिस्टम होता था?
हाँ, मैगी बना रहे हो.
Maggie to thi bro. Maggie, you know, like ice slime and stuff like that was very common. But we had a really good food court, right? It was not a mess, it was food court, which was
Okay.
crazy because a lot of people didn't like it, but I fucking loved that. So matlab Manipal mein amazing food court with really good food according to me. तो वही था bro. Yeah.
ओके ओके, मणिपाल पे है तो इट्स लाइक ओके, वी नो अबाउट योर स्टोरी इन मणिपाल की। ओके, you did freelancing, you did a book, but like where were you before that? Like how was your childhood like? Because
School
there is
life में.
I was
like
in,
I tried to
हाँ.
I've seen a lot of your stuff, but there was no mention about your childhood,
okay.
like what you were doing
Okay.
before that.
Yeah. So where I was born in Delhi. I lived in Pune for some time, maybe 6 years, early schooling, and then came to Bangalore. So came to Bangalore when I was maybe in third standard or something like that. Childhood was fun, I would say. I was very, very much of an introvert, very, very shy kid. My like main obsession during childhood was probably Pokemon. So I kind of like to think that, you know, a lot of my current NFT obsession probably started back then. That's why it's hitting me so hard. I love just trading, being just having this feeling of you're on school, you have this illegal item that if anybody finds, you're gonna, you know, it's gonna
The
be
card.
taken away from you.
The Pokemon card.
But now you have these cards and you know they have value. And that's like a system that is totally outside of school, totally outside of what the authorities, school, this thing,
Mhm.
and you can actually work towards something. So that was Pokemon was like my big obsession in school. I used to read a lot. Um, and Bangalore is, I would say I had a very nice school. But Bangalore, man, I don't know. It's just after I speak to other people about their school experience, I was like, dude, there was like very little bakchodi in my school, or maybe I just didn't see it.
Which school were
But
you in?
I was in Bangalore. There's a school called Frank Anthony.
Okay.
Um, तो
Was
हाँ
it a
bro, school
Catholic
was
school?
pretty average. वैसे ही था क्या?
Was it a Catholic school? Like,
It was an ICSC school.
I see.
हाँ,
Okay, I see. Okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it was fun, but for me, I think eventually towards the end of it, right, this whole IIT thing kind of started. So my whole obsession with Pokemon and all this stuff kind of ended, and I was like, fuck, I'm gonna have to now start focusing on this IIT thing,
Career.
which
Yeah.
for me started around 10th. And I was very easily influenced by my parents. I'll just say that, right? तो कहते थे पढ़ाई करो, I would be like, ठीक है, करते हैं पढ़ाई. Like I wanted to be more rebellious, and I was in certain ways, but I was like, पढ़ाई करनी है. Everybody's telling me I just have to do it. And then around 9th, 10th standard is when I first joined Facebook. Facebook matlab, had just come out a couple years before as well. And that for me was a kind of an eye opener because I was just like, dude, this is like really fucking fun. There was a site called Yahoo Answers back in the day. So we didn't have Discord, no Instagram, no Twitter as such, right? You can imagine maybe back then, the only people you would kind of see on the internet were not Indians. They were just random American people, right? So, and there were no forums, there were no communities, nothing like that. So for me, I eventually found my kind of where to spend time on Facebook as well as on Yahoo Answers. So on Yahoo Answers, I had a really like high ranking profile jahan pe I would just answer physics, maths, those kind of questions because I was like, bro, these American kids, they don't know shit. ये सब कुछ तो हमारे मतलब it's just
ये तो
straightforward stuff.
बेसिक्स है, ये तो बेसिक्स
I
है.
can just बहुत ही basic that I can earn points for it, right? And I can just become like top contributor in all these categories. So I figured out that game of, online grinding for um, just like that kind of some game I could play outside of studies. But that was basically my childhood, bro, to like just quickly go over that. Yeah.
I can very much relate to that illegal thing कि like एक बार मैं एक joke की किताब ले गया था. It was a joke book.
Yeah.
And it was like it's such a feeling कि like you have something illegal in your bag. When I got caught कि
Yeah.
like तब तो मेरे को दो थप्पड़ पड़े, वो अलग बात है.
Mm.
I
South
Bro,
में
like I had so
South
many rare cards that just got torn in front of me, bro.
oh my
Like,
god, what?
like I had to convince my, like dad, relatives, US eBay से ये links भेज के, get me this Articuno promo and all this stuff.
Mhm.
I get this set, I bring it to school, fucking gets torn, and it was just such a
Did you
like
cry?
that for me was the seed of, fuck the world. I need to do my own shit. Like I like to imagine, of course, I don't know. I was just pissed off back then. But hota tha, bro. It was really annoying. Yeah.
You said that you were very obedient, right? So, like, how did that obedient child become this rebellious kid who is, doing all
Yeah.
that NFT and Web3 shit now? What changed over the years?
Yeah. I think it was just exposure to more stuff, right? Exposure and realizing that nobody really cares about you as much as you care about yourself. Matlab,
Not even
of
parents?
course, I'll tell you what I mean by that.
Mhm.
Ki matlab, the reason everybody around me was forcing me to go into this IIT path was because that was just like the most high effort but high reward path. So of course, as a kid, my guess is yeah, you'll push them to high effort, high reward.
Mhm.
But the thing is, I knew the internet existed, right? Nobody around me, like parents, authority figures, nothing. They pretty much didn't like the internet was not a thing at all,
Mhm.
right? But I knew that there is a career to be built here. There is something here. I just couldn't articulate. And as a kid, nobody really takes you seriously.
Yep.
So after school, when I was in college, that's when I started meeting some people, talking to it. So that's when I met Varun Maya as well. Like
Mhm.
we were in the same IIT coaching center in 10th for like a
Okay.
couple of weeks together. And then we met 2 years later in college and we're like, oh, bro, you're here.
In Manipal.
And in Manipal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we started, trying to sell t-shirts, trying
Okay.
to just make some money, trying
Freelancing.
to do freelancing. And that's when I realized, like, bro, like, I know this is fun. I know that I have a good skill at this. I know that I could tell, like, in the future, obviously this can like go up really nicely. But I was like, nobody would have told me this if I hadn't like gone out and done it myself. Because nobody really cares for you to find the unique, rare thing that is perfect for you. They want to give you the basic suggestion that is for everybody. So that's when, I realized, and, I would have probably continued down the obedient, follow the path thing even through college. But the unfortunate truth was, no matter how much I grinded, I just could not get a good GPA. Like, it was just not
Okay.
happening. And
Okay.
we had a relative GPA scale as well, so not absolute. So that was like even fucking me up even more. So I was like
You need to
5
compete with
GPA, 6
others.
GPA. Yeah,
Really?
relative to the whole basically batch.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay.
I was just like really getting fucked. And I was like, dude, like literally I know the next step is like campus placement a couple of years later. And I was like, there is no chance. So then I feel like when you're forced to figure out something and you're like, kuch ho hi nahi sakta, that's when that urgency kicks in that, okay, fuck, I have to do something.
Have to do something.
And that's when it kicked in. And when I found design, I was like, bro, ye kar sakte hain. Matlab, it feels easy. It has a lot of depth. And then once you start going into it, I could tell even back then, this will be much bigger in the future. Right now, it feels like this kind of niche thing, but it's going to be really good. Like, apps are not going away. Smartphones are not going away. Yeah.
So,
Like now I'm on Twitter and like talking to people. UI UX is just a thing. But 2 years back in 2020, I got to know about UI UX from your side. Like
Yeah.
there was no one else talking about UI UX. And for you, it like right now I can like make parents understand ki, like okay, internet se paise aa sakte hai. But at that time when there was not even Geo, it must have been difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was 2013 maybe when I kind of started doing this, right? So
okay.
back then there was no UI UX design, it was web design.
Web
That's what it
design.
was, right? You design websites. And designing apps wasn't as much of a thing because smartphones the nahi us time pe.
Hey, nahi.
And App Store also wasn't that mature. Like iPhone only came out a couple years before that, right? 2000 maybe 9 May it first came out. So very, very niche thing, right? Even back then, other designers, right? Like the people who had been in that industry for long, they looked at UI UX design as, oh, bache, they're trying to make up this new keyword. Web design is the real shit.
Okay.
Right? And even back then, there was that culture ki, matlab, oh, it's smartphones are the small version. They're the light version. Like nobody cares about smartphones, right? It's just web design and apps, like web applications. That's the real shit. Very similar today when, how a lot of designers dismiss Web3. People dismiss Web3 as, "Arey bro, matlab, hum to kare aa rahe hain. Like, what is this new shit?" But it was pretty similar back then. Yeah.
What I have two questions from this. Like,
Mm.
what was the moment that like because you have seen like design evolve from like this so many years? What was the moment you think like okay, people started caring about designs of the apps, or it was just from starting, but it's just now pushed more?
Yeah. So US May, I think it happened very early, right? US May, like the very first versions of Facebook, they didn't look great, right? I kind of still have in my
I
mind
have a
some
rough
vague
image.
Maybe.
yeah, or Orkut bhi tha, Hi-Fi bhi tha. Like I can kind of remember they were like, theek hai. But I think it really started changing in my mind when iOS came out, when the first iOS came out, and in that, all the buttons look like candy. They have these highly glossy surfaces. Right? Like the Notes app looked like a leather notebook. And to see that as a designer, and you're like, bro, इन्होंने ये Photoshop में बनाया है. Like I was like, fuck, like I can't believe that. Right? I can't believe that they made an app that looks like a leather notebook with the stitches and all that in Photoshop. And I can do that. Like right now I'm making posters, like fest ke liye aise random cheezeं, but I could make this. And then as that grew, I think a lot of companies started picking up on that, right? And started making, like, of course, social media, communication, those kind of apps were there. But dheere dheere aur aate gaye, right? Like, for example, with Uber, when it came out, it was kind of crazy because till then everybody believed mobile was a light website. It was a smaller version.
Mhm.
What people didn't realize was mobile was actually more powerful because it had location access, it had
GPS.
phone, it had GPS, it had all of this stuff. So your phone could actually do more than computer, right? And it took people a lot of time to realize that. But for people who are in tech, they were like, "Fuck, this is crazy. This is why mobile apps probably are way more crazier than what we've been doing in the past." So for me, that was the thing, right? कि मेरे शुरू के freelance projects जो थे, it was very random graphic design, ये poster बना दो, ये बना दो.
Logos.
Logos,
Yeah.
like not fun stuff, nothing I would want to put in my portfolio.
Yep.
But eventually I started seeing projects for apps, and people are like, I want to make an app for मेरे gym में ये है, and I want to start accepting. And I was like, shit, like I'm just like a couple steps away from that. And then designing those apps, bro, was such a fun experience because you're trying to, it's not web design, it's not anything like before. That was a short period of time when apps remained skeuomorphic, right? Which is you're trying to mimic real world effects on a screen. So any button you do, you have to put the shadows, gloss, outlines, everything to make it look like a real button.
Real button.
That's when I got really, really deep into visual design, right? Making those pixel perfect kind of mocks. And then eventually iOS switched to iOS 7 onwards. It became like more flat design and this thing. And that's when I started getting more into like the UX kind of stuff. So I started with very visual stuff, then UX kind of stuff. And for me, the India mein bhi aa raha hai ye, right? That really hit much later because all this stuff was happening online. And I was like, okay, but in India, nobody really had an iPhone. Nobody I knew had an iPhone. So me, it was still a very online thing. But India mein, I think maybe 2015, 2016, 2017, when you started seeing more like common apps like food delivery, Swiggy aaya pehle, then Ola, then global companies started coming, Uber. That's when it started picking up, which I was like, fuck, like now I actually don't want to work with American clients. I want to kind of just focus on India because I know कि इस duration में बहुत सारे apps बनने वाले हैं which are going to just kind of take that stage. So for me, that happened, and then that's when I joined Housing. Because Housing.com, their whole idea was that housing websites are shit. मतलब फोटो भी नहीं डालते लोग, right? You can't find out.
मेरे को मैं अभी नई जगह पे शिफ्ट हुआ, मेरे को housing.com से मिला घर, मैं उसी में बैठा हूँ.
Yeah, अच्छा. Perfect, bro, perfect. But exactly वही idea था, right? It's such a opaque industry. मतलब कुछ बताना नहीं चाहते, people trying to screw you over at every point. And that time, this felt revolutionary to me. Ki people are saying we're going to do really good design, and we're going to make it transparent, like we're going to make everything visible. And the whole brand and stuff, they had paid like a international agency to create their whole campaign, which was look up. And their whole concept was look up at how much better it can be if we really focus on design and experience. And bro, I was like blown away. So like I stopped freelancing everything. I moved to Bombay. I was like, I need to join your team. They were aggressively hiring back then. So like I joined, and within a couple of months, it was like 55 designers. And then of course layoffs happened like just within the end of that year. Fell to about 8 designers. But that kind of culture of using design to, people thought India is very difficult as a market to really crack into it. Indian consumers have very different, let's just say, expectations from US consumers. But that I think was kind of a proof for everybody that, okay, design can be used as a differentiator. Yeah.
If I have to summarize it as a problem statement, कि the problem was कि like okay, phone has a lot of complexity क्योंकि इसमें location भी है, ये भी है, वो भी है, and UX designer actually started solving that कि okay, for a normal user like me जिसे नहीं समझ में आता क्या करना है, we can navigate it.
Yeah. And I think another kind of trend that happened was frequency started increasing, frequency of use. So it got more and more important to work on design. Like just an example, if you were using Yahoo Answers back in 2009, it was on your computer. There was no smartphone as such, right? So you would log on for maybe a few hours a day, and then you go back to your normal life. But what started happening with mobile was people, of course, can log on anytime. So now as you started spending more time on this and the frequency of use increased, suddenly the amount of attention that you had to put in designing that experience got really high. Right? So that's when people started putting a lot of effort into design, a lot of effort into the experience because people were like, this is a very high frequency use case. So
And to have more retention, you need good design because people won't stay if it's a bad
yes,
design product.
Hmm.
And retention is basically everything for an app because itne sare apps hai.
correct. Or apps and websites today, it wasn't really like that because if it was usually a more office user or a more somebody who's working at a desktop kind of thing. So you could also assume they had they already had some amount of experience working with computers. They were already kind of technically savvy.
Okay.
But with phones, you couldn't assume that. It could be anybody. So that was also another reason why you had to really think about every single thing. Yeah.
I have multiple questions here, but this one question I had in my mind is, you mentioned a lot of times that you knew that this would be big, and you can see yourself doing this.
Yeah.
How did you build this intuition? Like, is it something you were born with, or do you think you can build intuition? Like, how do I know that कि ये मैं कर रहा हूँ, ये बड़ा होने वाला है? Because well, judgment is everything, right?
Like even in
True.
one of your Web3 thing, one of your Web3 thing, you said ki like ETH is going to be the future currency.
The native currency.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like what made you make that prediction? Like what were you thinking while making that prediction?
See, there's no special intuition or anything, but the simple way I think about it is just momentum, right? Looking for momentum. Momentum is, once you learn how to spot momentum, you start seeing it in everything, right? So even with smartphones, I had my first phone that I got in maybe 10th or 11th was a HTC Touch. Like my dad had used it for 2-3 years and then he had given it to me. It had some old Windows OS or something on it. So it was before Android even existed. And bro, I tried to use that, but बहुत ही basic था और कुछ होता नहीं था उस पे. But when I saw iPhone, I was like, bro, people are loving this and it feels fun to use. Like it was just kind of obvious कि momentum है इसमें. मतलब ये और बड़ा होगा, people will like this, right? Similarly, when India में जब Jio हुआ, हमें सबको पता था bro कि अब मतलब it's not going to go back, right? आगे ही जाएगा, ऊपर ही जाएगा, right? It's going to be way more than this. So, and same with Web3, we see momentum. So it's more of that. I try to see कहाँ पे momentum है, and accordingly I try to place my bets. Like even with freelancing, when I first did it, I was like, matlab, why have I never heard about this at all? Why has nobody told me freelancing was an option, right? Dollars में मिल रहा है मुझे पैसे, और मैं घर में बैठा हूँ, मतलब why hasn't anybody told me? And then once I do it for a couple of months, I'm like, bro, like, matlab, I'm pretty sure in a couple of years, everybody will realize that this is an option. Or maybe they've already realized, और मुझे नहीं पता, मैं ही late हूँ. But वो momentum दिख जाता है. And of course, that also takes time. Like us time freelancing and online work was still a kind of taboo kind of thing. Matlab, when you told your relatives, they're like, "Acha, call center mein baith ke kaam kar rahe ho." Like it was that kind of feeling that they had. Right? Very gross. मतलब
office नहीं
job
जाते,
नहीं है, मतलब
office नहीं
मिलते
जाते
नहीं हो लोग उसके like. और मतलब that also took time, but there was momentum. And अब remote work आ रहा है, अब it's like more of a sexy thing. But momentum की बात है, दिख जाता है मतलब. Yeah.
How you convinced your parents?
Bro, I had to. So my dad pretty much didn't care. He was like, "Jo karna hai karo." But I knew, of course, it was more my mom that I had to convince. I really wanted to drop out, bro, but wo hua nahi. Matlab, that was something I could not convince, right? Because I was already in my, I think, 3rd year by then. They're like, "Nahi, bilkul bhi nahi, like not possible." But literally, what I had to do was I noticed that when I started doing more freelancing, started posting my work online, I would start getting LinkedIn messages. At Twitter, I don't think I was very active back then. But LinkedIn, I would get messages from recruiters. And I was like, bro, like these people want to hire me right now. People looking for UI, UX designers back then. So I was like, fuck, like this is signal. I'm not going to take these jobs. But I literally started saving screenshots and I fucking printed them out, bro. And I was like, one day I took it to my mom and I was like, ye dekho. And she was like, you don't have to do this. What are you doing? This extra drama of showing me printouts and all. But I was like, no, just look at this. Right? Because the reason you want me to go into this because you think about safety. You think about, matlab, isme guaranteed kind of hai. But you are scared about these new options. But I want to just show you some external validation. तो वही हुआ, but and I think other than that, once you keep persisting and parents know it's not just a craze that you will do it anyways, they kind of give up. So I think that's what happened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Uh,
So
so I have a small question here. Ki, like,
Hmm.
do in India, I think, like, at least parents think, at least the generation before us think, see, like, the opportunities are scarce. Do you see that in other countries as well?
I don't think so, bro. Matlab, I don't know for sure,
Hmm.
right? But I don't think so. Like, यहाँ पे, for example, I'm in Denmark, and I feel like kids are too chill, bro. Matlab, they don't, they're not scared. They're not worried about the future. They're just chilling, right? And one, of course, example of that would be, it's not in India. You can't just like it's a. There is also certain types of jobs are kind of looked down upon, right? Which is not there everywhere else. Like in India, if you were to just go to McDonald's and say, I'm going to work at McDonald's for some time while I figure it out,
mhm.
people are not going to look at you positively, right?
Yep,
Especially if you're in a certain, मतलब you've grown up in
For
a
sure,
certain
for sure.
society.
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Versus everywhere else, it's like, theek hai, bro, you're at McDonald's, or you're driving a bus, or you're doing this kind of thing,
I
right?
figure it out.
And you're figuring it out. And even if that's a career, like carpenters here make a lot of money, for example, right? But in India, you couldn't say, I'm going to become a carpenter. So I think everywhere else, the blue collar and white collar, of course, working at a desk versus working on the field is universal, right? You do
Mhm.
that. But blue collar jobs, way more like kind of accepted here. So I feel India may, that's one thing. But and the second is just the population,
Mhm.
right? Which is the metric to look at is in a year, the number of people graduating is more than anywhere else in the world. So it's almost like in that year, there is just way more throughput, way more
The
people coming.
supply is more, and the demand is
Supply
not
is more.
not necessarily okay.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes.
I was
So I think उसकी
actually
वजह से feel हो जाता है. Yeah.
I was actually seeing a video like few days back where the person was
Mhm.
explaining कि like Indian people don't want job anymore. Like in the past 3-4 years,
Yeah.
they're exhausted from looking from job, and now they've stopped looking for job. They're either living off their parents' property or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Started doing that. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
basically, but like, do you think like opportunities are scarce?
I think absolute sense and relative sense, right? Absolute sense, I think probably yes, right? If you consider actually the whole population,
Hmm.
it's difficult, bro. Like in general, I feel like if you're from a very small town and if you're not earning that much, like everything is kind of against you, right? Everything is very difficult. Like there is
Mhm.
actual real fucking adversity that you would go through,
Mhm.
and your number of options that you can do kind of become very less.
Hmm.
But in a relative sense, not at all. Like if you're the kind of person who went to a nice engineering college, kind of understands what's happening online, is
Mhm.
able to have a conversation, you quickly realize that, bro, there are at least 7 paths here, right?
Mhm.
I can all I it's it actually depends on me. I have to now
Choose.
commit, choose,
Yeah.
and actually just do it for 6 months, a year, and it's pretty much going to happen.
Mhm.
But in an absolute sense, I think people, it's still very challenging. हो सकता है smartphone से that's changing and more people realize the options available,
Mhm.
but it's still really hard, bro. I think India में.
I think
I
we
think
like
the
okay, we hear these stories ki like okay, from a tier 3 person someone figured out from internet, but
Yeah,
they're like very less according to the population right now.
true,
Got it.
true.
I had one question. You said that you left freelancing, working for foreign clients, and you joined housing.
Hmm.
So generally, most people won't do that because you're working with foreign clients, you're making dollars, you're spending in
Yeah,
rupees. Like that is the best shit ever. You're working remote.
true.
So why did you join housing, or in terms of not if not housing, why did you join a full time job versus working as a freelancer for US clients?
Hmm. I think the main reason was um see, one reason was definitely it was more lonely to do so, right? Just
Okay.
freelancing, because I had graduated from college, and I was in college. Freelancing is fun because you have other people,
Other
you're going to
people.
class, you're coming back, मतलब रात को बैठ के कर रहे हैं. Versus after it was done, I was like just sitting in Starbucks alone. So I was like, ठीक है, this is not sustainable, this is not fun. I will still look out for और क्या कर सकते हैं. And then the second reason was housing actually paid designers a lot more than other companies back then. And you know, like after housing, a lot of founders were like, you know, you've spoiled the job market for us
रेट्स बढ़ गए
by overpaying salaries,
Overpaying
and you know, अब हमें मुश्किल हो रहा है hire करना. But they were paying pretty well, bro. Like literally for my first job there, they were, I think it was a 15 lakhs salary, and I was like, bro, like, you know, I'm pretty good with this, and I wanted to some excuse to move out of Bangalore from my house. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to Bangalore. And also it was, I didn't know any other designers back then. I knew very few, like one or two designers. And housing had a team of like 30-40 designers. So I was like, you know, I'll definitely learn more, and I will try to, I think just being in that environment, I knew I could probably learn a lot more from them. So those were the reasons. Yeah.
Learn while you earn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is all this designing stuff, but इसमें affiliate blog और like drop shipping कब आया?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Affiliate तो बीच में चलता रहता है, bro. Like, you know, like even during college, I was like, freelancing is fine, but I want to just like make other types of money as well. So I did blogs and stuff. It didn't really work too much. I actually didn't have the focus to do it on a sustained thing. Like all my projects in college, I would do it for 2-3 months, and I'd be like, nah, bro, let's do something else. But so now I know that, okay, fuck, it takes grind. It takes much longer to do it. But back then I would give up on projects very quickly. Nahi chal raha, just leave it, do the next thing. But dropshipping, I did it actually way later, matlab, after housing, just as a random experiment. And it kind of worked out. Like, matlab, not to a crazy Shopify screenshots on Instagram kind of level.
That's good.
But ठीक है, like couple $100, $1,000, $2,000 randomly aa rahe hain. But even then, right, I stopped it within like 4-5 months, because till then my mindset was just like, you know, I was always looking for the shiny new thing. So even if something worked, I was like, okay, let's find something else. So that was one of the reasons why I did so many different things. And that makes it difficult, because now like 10K designers, I've been doing it for 2.5 years, but it's very difficult. It was very difficult for me to actually sustain like this, because my mindset was
Find a new shiny thing.
New shiny thing. And even now I'm kind of doing that with NFTs, but I'm way more aware that, matlab, no, I can't stop this business that I have going, because it is more of a slow grind. Yeah.
Do you think
You
like,
said this? You said this one thing, that all your side hustles will probably die soon or one day, and you have to live with that, and you just find something else. Just experiment a lot and double down on your work. Karta hai. So yeah, I think that's true with dropshipping and other things.
Happens. Yeah.
And even in this thread, you have mentioned ki, like, it's not all of it. Like, you have left out some things which
Left
you
out a lot
think
of
you like.
things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, bro. And you know, and of course they're not very successful either. Like there have been side projects that died within 1 week. And I can tell you, most of these, it didn't die because product was bad. Sometimes it died because I didn't have the skill to do it. Right. So I would reach a certain point, I would be like, iske baad nahi ja sakte. Like I need to have more development skills or marketing skills. So then I start learning, and then the side project just dies. Or a lot of times it was just me. I was like, you know, this is cool, but it's kind of unsexy. So let's just find something else that is more exciting. Unsexy as in, like, for example, I had one affiliate blog, and this was, I think, it was a jobs related kind of site.
Okay.
And every person that clicked through and applied to the job, I would get like $100 or something like that.
Okay.
Right. And I did it for 1 week or 2 weeks. Matlab, 1 or 2 people converted. And I was like, bro, matlab, I was like, I don't want, it was unsexy, because I was like, I'm not going to tell any of my friends about this, right? It's not even interesting enough to say that. It's a WordPress blog with
I have a
Just this
marketplace
kind
for
of thing.
jobs where people click on it and get paid money for the referral.
Yeah, and it wasn't
Okay,
even good, bro. It wasn't even good. Well, it was just a WordPress blog with, I was just collecting and manually adding. So I was like, unsexy.
In the same thread, you mentioned that two things helped you a lot. One is the PMF, which is the classic product market fit, and the second is the founders market fit. So PMF, to pata hai. What is a founders market fit?
It's more of, we can do anything technically, right? Me, you, we can do anything. Like
Okay.
we can, it's not really that we are made for marketing, made for design, made for coding, made for something else. We can do anything. It's just some things will take a little longer to set up. And then some things, it'll take a while before you cross that initial curve,
Mhm.
after which you start being good and start making money. We can do anything.
Mhm.
But the thing is, there are some things which, right, that feeling of this is unsexy, for example,
Mhm.
everybody feels that for certain things, right? Like I can tell you about design. A lot of people stop designing not because they weren't able to figure out Figma or weren't able to make, an app or a website, but they're like, bro, I am not the creative type of person. Right?
Mhm.
They just believe that.
Mhm.
And then they're like, okay, theek hai, because of that, I am going to now get into programming. So it's usually people have these, you could call them self-limiting beliefs, or it just their identity stops them from doing certain things. So for me, it was pretty much that, right? Founder market fit. I was like, I can do all of these things, but mostly I have been on a design path.
Mhm.
So I need to do things that are design heavy. Otherwise, I'm going to get bored very easily. So I tried to then, I tried other stuff, of course, but jahan pe there wasn't any design, I wasn't as interested because design mein us time pe I was still getting a lot of wins. Matlab, once you get used to doing well in a certain field, other fields look boring to you because you're like, bro, isme kuch ho hi nahi
Winning.
raha hai. Matlab, it's
I'm
so
winning
slow.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's very intuitive to you, ki, like what makes something sexy for you. It's intuitive. It's not like you have defined in your mind ki, like this is sexy or not. It's just
Yeah.
intuitive to you. Ki,
It's
okay,
not
this
intuitive.
is.
It's like pata chal jata hai. Matlab, I do it for a week or 2 weeks and then I get bored. And if I'm not able to bring myself back, well, of course, I feel a little guilty कि मतलब छोड़ रहे हैं project and all that.
Mhm.
But yeah.
I did that twice with design. Like I started designing. I learned your. I actually went through your playlist, like 4 5 videos, and then I left it as like,
That's
okay,
good. That's
it's
good.
not happening. It's not working for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
Uh,
you have a very aesthetic setup.
Hmm.
You have a very aesthetic setup. So was
Yeah,
it like you were
thanks.
was it like you were aesthetic before and then design sort of like helped you became more aesthetic, or when you
all
started designing
the
you were like okay कि मेरे को थोड़ा aesthetic चाहिए अब मेरे को like अपना environment भी design करना है.
Mhm.
Hmm. Mostly the second thing, कि environment भी design करना है because when I moved here, I knew that up to physical meetings are totally over for me, and I'm in a different country now, and COVID के बीच में भी था ये.
Mhm.
So I was like, if most of the people are going to meet me through the screen, I might, and I'm obviously, like we would probably check our hair before getting on a call. We would check out what we're wearing, but background becomes a part of that then,
Mm.
right? Because most people are going to interact through this. So I was like, okay, let's focus a little bit on that. But shuru se I knew that I liked good design, and I knew ki matlab, I mean, for me it was that feeling ki I have something in mind, and I knew the basics of Photoshop and kuch bana diya, and it looks good. And people wouldn't know that it's somebody who has just 5 hours of experience who made this. I was like, bro, that is a crazy thing that I've been able to achieve. So then with design, I was just kind of pushing that and seeing that, okay, aesthetic sense is one thing, but can I create aesthetic outputs, right? Everybody likes good design, everybody likes good objects, but can they make them? So that was my thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so we talked so much about design in the last few minutes,
Mm.
but also I think with Prakhar, it was podcast with Prakhar that you mentioned that you don't see yourself doing design over the long term, like in the long
Yeah.
game. So what does that mean? Like, would you leave design entirely, or
Yeah.
like what?
In some ways, I'm probably not going to go back to a design job.
Mm-hmm.
So that way I think I have left design in some ways,
Okay.
because I'm not going to be climbing that like that career path of senior product designer, head of design, director of design, VP of design, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So that way I've kind of left that path. But I think for me, just running a business is way more interesting, way more challenging as well, right? I wish I could do just design. Matlab, business like kicks your ass in a lot of ways. But it's just more interesting to me. And it's just a little wider scope. Like with design, I kind of felt sometimes like the canvas is very limited, like doing apps and websites. As a designer, you're still very limited on other people, right? Which is the programmers, the devs, front end, back end. People have to take it out to the market. Like as design, you're doing one part of it, which is the experience and the front facing thing that people interact with. But from a creative perspective or from a building something big, I was like, dude, I don't really I want to do something where I can actually take full ownership of something. And so I just enjoy running a business a lot more. I of course still enjoy design, but it's more in business aspects, like designing processes or something for my business. Yeah.
And that's why you are like doing the interior design for like so long, because it's like a business right now, because cohorts
Yeah.
and every year.
Yeah.
It's
And
also
it still has my strength of design like kind of
Yeah, like
attached to it.
attached to it.
So
Yeah.
it also a
yeah.
part of your identity. Do you feel that?
That's a bad thing, bro, actually. It is, but I feel like it's a
How
bad thing.
how is that
How
a
it's a
bad thing?
bad thing?
I'll tell you how it's a bad thing, bro. Like when I got into NFTs, for example, and not even in a crazy way, I haven't built any product or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I just flipping, for example. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, bro, इसमें बहुत मजा आ रहा है. I can just kind of do this, right? You see people making kind of big wins. You're like, dude, just get into this and do it. But the thing is, it's so difficult, or it gets more and more difficult to abandon something you've been working on for these
Oh,
many years, right? So it's just that switching to something else after having spent 8 to 10 years doing this feels very bad. Like every
Mm-hmm.
part of you is like, bro, matlab,
you're
just go
literally
back,
you're
do
leaving your
this, you're good
house,
at it.
leaving your
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
I'll give you one more example, right? I was at the gym yesterday and I saw this guy who's like really buff, right, with good aesthetics. And I
Wait,
am obviously not. I am still kind of a beginner there. And I saw him do like I think 80 kg bench press. And he did it, bro. He did it really well. And I was inspired. I was like, fuck, like that's crazy. And then I was like, bro, like, um, he of course has put in all of that effort all these years. So for him to have reached this point, maybe 5 years later or 8 years later, however long he was in his journey, like he's not gonna give this up now, right? His weights are only gonna get heavier and heavier. And why should he give it up? Right? Because he's number one good at it. He has the capability that a beginner doesn't have, and beginners are inspired when they see him. So I'm like, bro, like it's just once something, it's a part of your identity, but once you develop strength in something, it's very hard to let that go. And I don't even know if it's the right thing to let it go. Yeah.
So it's not like it's bad or good. It's a
I
gray area. Like
I don't think there is no answer.
It feels bad. I don't know if it is actually, but it definitely feels bad. It's like imagine you worked out for 8 years, you have a really good body, and now you have to leave it.
it's
I don't think you would do that.
I was having the same conversation with Mitesh ki like, okay, मैं 1.5 साल से podcasting कर रहा हूँ. Now it's a part of my identity. And he was asking me
Yeah.
like, would you give it up? And I'm like, no, bro, it can't happen. Even
Yeah.
though I have
Yeah.
to invest in it, I'm like, why should I give up? Like it's giving me benefits and all that, but it's
True.
like it's hard. I can't go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even if we do, we'll very quickly come back to it.
It will happen. It will
And
happen.
we'll come back to it with more effort because like fuck, I can't believe I left it. Matlab, let's go at it even harder now.
It seems like you're talking about an addiction which has withdrawal symptoms. Like you leave it
Yeah.
immediately, smoking, and strict withdrawal. Ho raha
It is like that, bro. Yeah.
hai. Okay, just since design pe itne hai, it's sad that people see you just as a designer, because we we consumed a lot of your content in the past few weeks, and I don't think you're just a designer. You're like
Mm.
you're obviously more than a designer, as a content creator or as a mentor, if that is a good word to give you.
Mm.
I see yourself talking about so many other things which are not relevant to design. Where this one podcast with again Prakhar was space is fake. It is that
Mhm.
podcast has nothing to do with design or Abhinav as known
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
public figure. And that is in your Twitter feed, for example. If anyone wants to know about Abhinav, Twitter feed jaake check karo. It's so interesting and unique. I
Mm.
don't see a designer Abhinav just a designer. I see more than that.
I
And
I
I
think the
think that is a
best thing I saw was ki like okay, even I struggle with like nihilism and all these ideas sometimes.
mm,
Like, when you start
Yeah.
consuming Peterson, it's like normal.
yes.
Happens, bro.
No.
Yeah.
So when usually I get answers like ki, okay, you have to build meaning yourself. There is no meaning. You have to live with that and all that. But
Yeah.
you gave me a totally different perspective. Okay, like पहले axioms change करते हैं. Maybe it's not a world like we see it. It's a game. And if we are playing this game,
Yeah.
we probably chose to play this game. And that was really
Yeah.
good कि like okay, मैं 1.5 साल से नाइलिज्म में फंसा हूँ, बट मैंने कभी सोचा ही नहीं कि मैं अपने एग्जीम्स चेंज करूँ.
Mm.
But you gave me that कि like okay, you can change that.
Nice, bro. Good to hear that. Yeah. Mm.
So so why, so there is this thing कि like you are, whatever you are earning or like whatever your business is like around design, then why
Yeah.
do you feel the need to like put out content like this? Space is fake, and
Yeah.
even your second channels, it's
Yeah.
never about, it's not about design, it's something totally
True.
different. You're even doing a kavi sammelan, and I was like, ye kya?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like that, bro. I mean, it's just on one hand, I can definitely say it's a bit of a distraction from the main design thing, right? Sometimes when that gets really, really intense, having something else to do is kind of nice.
Escapism,
But
or
the main reason is, yeah, what?
sort of an escapism from design that
Yeah,
you're not
yeah,
in the world.
exactly. And it's still something I can kind of do. But I think it's also I just go through this stuff, bro. Like I know that for my business, the best thing to do is just 100% focus on that, or just, for example, go even heavier, adopt the identity, let's say, of a founder, raise some money, go fully into that. But I can't commit myself to doing that, bro. I don't know. Maybe later in life that changes. But I do go through the same kind of existential shit. It's just that I kind of want to take all of that and squeeze it into some type of content. Because also talking about it kind of makes it more real.
Okay.
Because you've said it and now it's not just in your mind anymore.
Yeah, it's in
And
your
everybody
words.
else has heard you say it. So you're like, oh fuck,
Yeah.
like, is that still true? Or is this still running in my mind? So it's just fun to do. And you can think of it as experiments also. Like I definitely see value in it, which is, let's say I did the 30-day Web3 streams last year. Although that wasn't directly useful in my business or anything, it still was helpful in the sense that now I know that if I ever need to do that again, I can.
You can do that.
Right? Like doing it for 30 years, it's not something I imagined I could do. Or I was like, okay, maybe I can do it, but it'll be very difficult. But after doing that, I'm like, okay, fuck, if I ever need to do that for my design thing, I probably can do it. So it's just sort of like to prove to myself that it's possible.
And people are excited about it. Like when you drop the first video this year, I was just like, okay,
Yeah.
ready for second season.
Yeah. And that's fun, bro. It's fun to see that, people also kind of like to engage with this. So yeah.
My first newsletter was on this कि like okay, you see like creators को these benefits मिल रहे हैं कि उनको पैसे मिल रहे हैं, like connections मिल रही है, whatever, but there is one more
Yeah.
thing, what you get is public accountability. And I'm like, and
True.
also
True.
I don't think whose quote was this, but it was like you're more afraid of shame than death, sort of. And even though we know कि like okay, 3,000 followers on Twitter or 4,000 followers, it doesn't matter. Like they don't care about us after a week or so. But it feels public accountability, and then you remain consistent with the thing you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think eventually you have to give it up also, right? Which is, it's like it's very easy to avoid those feelings of public accountability. People are going to say stuff about it. But eventually you have to transcend it. Like when I look at these founders, right? Like some amazing founders who are my friends, like even Varun, or, like let's say Misho, for example, right? People talk so much shit about startups for no reason, right? Imagine being a founder and everything you say, people just keep Like
attacking
Flipkart, right? You look
you.
at the founders, it's all filled with Flipkart saying my order didn't reach me. Right? That must be so fucking annoying as a founder. But I'm pretty sure that founders reach that place where they stop caring about it. And they have to, because it's not an option anymore. So I want to kind of force myself to do that as well, in whatever way, is applicable to me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, we are talking about the Web3 live stream. So, how did the Bro DAO came into existence? Because I was not able to find the existence. It started out as a
Yeah.
joke, but like, how did you solidify it?
I don't think we did anything specific. It was just the streams definitely helped, because that is like I think after every day or every 2 days, we would share the Discord link on Twitter
Hmm.
and then delete it after 24 hours. So slowly getting people in. So for them, it was kind of like an onboarding experience where it is happening and then there is something coming up immediately that day. But outside of that 1 month, I don't think we did anything else. Like we did that pretty much set it up. And, conversations kind of went down after the streams, but it kind of picked up again. And now the Discord is just as active as last year during its peak, because now people are just kind of on their own. So also for me, it was kind of difficult to resist, like, doing a product around it or monetizing it or launching something new. But I did this and I was like, bro, as an experiment, it worked. And now it's there, but that's it. Like my kind of thing is done with this. So now I'm just going to let it be out there. Yeah.
और उसके बाद
What-
ट्विटर अकाउंट सस्पेंड हो गया.
And so now it's not even Twitter. It's just जो Discord है वो है.
Why did it got suspended? Like, what, something like against the violation or something against the Twitter guidelines?
It'll be back, bro. It'll be back.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, let's see. अभी के लिए है, but yeah.
तो कितने लोग हैं ब्रो डाओ में?
I wouldn't call it a DAO, right? वो तो हमने ऐसी Twitter handle के लिए we needed something, so we just put
every
DAO.
startup has a HQ behind the name.
Yeah. Exactly. Like the DAO aspects, we don't have too many of them. Like we had done some group NFT purchases, so there is a kind of DAO element where we are voting on decisions and stuff.
Mhm.
But other than that, it's just a Discord. But I think Bro has about maybe 1,200 people, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
And now no one can enter.
I mean, they can, it's just the invite link is in the Discord. So if you just ask anybody, they'll probably share it. But I'm not trying to promote or do anything, because I know I'm not really doing anything to grow it. Yeah.
चल मितेश, इसके बाद लिंक का पता करते हैं कहाँ मिलेगा.
Yeah.
So you are still
This is one thing. I think this is like one of the most famous things you did, at least in terms of Google search पे तो ये दिखाता है, that you made this app with your friends, which was Listen, which was really sexy, and I like the idea of listening music with other people. I just want to know that, So I think the only problem I saw was the distribution part, that there was some problem with building distribution for the app. If you have to
Yeah.
if you have to build something again, something like that, how will you change it? Like, what will you do differently? Because even I think you retweet this tweet that you only see the what could be better once you build it. So now that you've built an app, you know how to scale it. If you had to do it again, how would you do it differently? And something even other people can listen to and maybe learn from it.
I think it was a very different time also back then, right?
Mhm.
This was maybe 2017, if I remember correctly, around
Mhm.
that time.
Yep.
And we didn't have any Indian users, so that was kind of a disadvantage. Like I feel like today, if I did it, I would just shit post on Twitter, and I would just do maybe be on Twitter all day,
All
and
the
that
day.
would be the main growth strategy, and it would work. But
It works.
back then, this was not even a Indian audience. It was just US based. Spotify tha hi nahi India mein, right? And you needed a Spotify premium account to use it properly.
Which is a very small audience.
Very
India
small
mein to hoga
audience,
hi
right?
nahi.
Yeah. So for us, it became like, fuck, how do we even acquire users? Like we had to do all this weird stuff. That's when all this, like drop shipping knowledge and this random bits of experiments come into handy, because then when you don't have a playbook, you have to like now somehow try to figure out. So we did a lot of Instagram stuff where we would DM musicians saying, use our app generated images with music as well as a acquisition channel. So we just DMing a lot of people saying, use this, or we would say use this as a way to chat with your fans, like say, you want to listen to this new song with me. So we tried a lot of that stuff, but again, the main problem was the number of accessible users was so small, and you had to have Spotify Premium. So that was the main reason it didn't work out. And of course, we could have pivoted into something else, but we actually wanted to build a solid music social app, and we didn't want to build anything else. So then in that space, we were pretty much tapped out. Yeah.
You can't even get music, like it's not like you download करके लगा दिया. Yeah, you want rights and it. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Very dependent on a lot of things, right? Dependent on, of course, having a tech team and all this stuff, which we were able to do. Also dependent on Spotify APIs, SoundCloud APIs. We were able to find groups of users, which is always good when building an app. Rather than trying to find individual users, try to find groups that you can onboard all at once.
Okay.
But there weren't too many groups that we could go after.
And you were building all this in cafes and stuff with your team.
Yeah. And remotely, when remote was seen as a disadvantage, right? So we were in Bangalore, initially Bangalore, Delhi, and Singapore. And then the Singapore guy, I convinced him to move to Bangalore. So then it was Bangalore and Delhi. But yeah, I think that was also it was a disadvantage for us, definitely. Because early stage, you kind of want to be together so that just things go faster. And when something fails, it doesn't take 4 or 5 days to try again.
The feedback loop is faster.
Exactly. So for early stage, I would not, want to do remote again. Yeah.
It becomes easy.
So you have lived in so many places. What would you prefer, Delhi, Bangalore, maybe Singapore, maybe, and Denmark now? And what is different in majorly overall? What do you feel as a place apart from the country alag hai and everything?
Staying in a place, I've mostly stayed in Bangalore, and I think it was advantageous for me that everything was happening in Bangalore itself. Like
till today, it's happening, I guess.
Yeah. And I actually kind of feel bad right now that I'm missing all this, because now I think there's a lot more people in Bangalore. There's a lot more things happening now.
Okay.
People are doing
I don't know.
meetups
For me, this is also my first experience of living outside India, Denmark. And it's trade-offs, bro. Like, of course, some things are better here. Air is clean, like amenity is nicer. It's a well-designed city and all that. But then on the negative side, there's hardly any sun here. Like, it's summer right now and it's still fucking 13 degrees.
Oh.
I don't have that social circle here that I do in Bangalore. Even in terms of founders, there's no real founders here. There's no tech happening here, right? So in some ways that affects your kind of feedback loops, where in Bangalore, when you see everybody doing something, you're like, oh, fuck, bro. Like, I need to go back and I need to go hard at what I'm doing. Here you see everybody just chilling out, drinking a beer, sitting in the park. Like, you feel like doing the same thing then. So I don't know, bro. I don't know what my ideal place is. Like, for a lot of reasons, I do sometimes feel like I should just be in Bangalore. For other reasons, I'm like, this is still a very nice city. But let's see. Yeah.
Okay.
Why did you move to Denmark? We never asked you, I guess.
Yeah. My wife got a job here.
Okay.
So initially we were just doing long distance. But then eventually that was like pakaos.
Long distance after marriage.
Yeah. After marriage, did that shit. Got my visa. And yeah, now I got a spouse visa. So that's lucky for me. I don't have to really get a work visa job or anything. I can just do 10K designers. But yeah, it's definitely lonely, bro. Compared to being in Bangalore where there's so much action happening.
Oh, okay. So I have a question from a designer. She's my friend and she asked me does with country design change? Like how people think about design change with countries? Or
Absolutely,
places?
bro. A lot. It actually changes a lot. And that's a good question. I think the reason it changes so much is because the culture changes so much. And because of that, people's default ways of thinking, things that they've grown up and used to, all of those are very different, right? Like one example I'll give you, not from a tech perspective, maybe from a cultural perspective, is in India, when you see a really good house, you can't see inside it, right? Matlab, like, let's say if you're in Gurgaon, Delhi, you're seeing these amazing, whatever, koti bungalows.
Koti
There are no large windows,
Mm.
right? You can't see inside at all. Because India has that more of a privacy type of thing, where you don't want to show people what's inside your house, at least not to strangers. Because obviously, bro, like, loot lenge, or it'll get broken into and
we
stuff.
don't even talk about money. That's why only.
We don't even talk about money, exactly. Versus here, people don't even use your curtains, bro. Right? Like, you're walking down the street, you can look into everybody's houses.
Okay.
You
Interesting.
can literally just see people in there in the kitchen, they're doing stuff. You can see exactly what's on their wall in the living room. Right? This is in Denmark, Scandinavia, because it's a high trust society in some ways. Now, I don't know exactly what are the factors, right? I'm sure there's a lot of them, but it's a high trust society in those ways, and it's a low trust society here. Now, that's a very big cultural thing that you feel while walking on the streets. But there are probably hundreds of things like that just in the culture. Like, as a kid who grew up here, for example, like the street that I live on, if I was walking down that street 200 years ago, it would probably look exactly the same, because it's those small European kind of
European.
buildings with, small narrow streets. It would look exactly the same 200 years ago. Now, India, you can't imagine that. You can't imagine, like, things change at such a rapid
The
pace.
British, the British was here 200 years ago.
Exactly, right?
रोड एक
And
साल से
India,
ज्यादा चल ही नहीं
we are in
सकता.
such a fast growth phase.
Yeah, it's a growth.
So imagine that, right? As a kid, you've grown up in a place where it's pretty much been the same from the day you were born to when you finish your high school. I feel like that has a huge effect on you. Versus in India, within our lifetimes, it's changed so much. So we are more likely to imagine that the future is going to be different. Versus here, I feel like people are more likely to imagine future is going to stay the same. Now, these are all cultural differences. And I think it also plays an effect into how you use tech. Like, you and I, we use our smartphones like pretty much a lot,
All day.
right? But all day, like anytime, for most of our primary important activities, we use our smartphone. Versus there are a lot of people here who, of course, maybe not the younger crowd, that's still maybe very similar. A lot of people here who use the smartphone maybe once a day, right? They use it. They would use the smartphone almost as an appliance, the same way you would use your toaster once a day. Use your smartphone once a day. The rest of the time is just sitting there for calls, right? And maybe this is the older generation. Like, our parents don't do that. Our parents are also all the time on WhatsApp and stuff like that. So there are cultural differences, and I think that kind of flows into everything else, because when you design these products, you're designing them for humans. Now, of course, the main global top 5, top 10 products, Facebook,
Are this sort of same?
they're pretty much the same, right? So there are similarities. Like, a kid here will flex on Instagram stories, Instagram, the same way that a kid there would. But yeah, there are differences, bro. There are differences. Like, you will feel that the difference in the culture. You will feel it in the people's attitudes towards tech, right? A lot of people here think tech is negative. And I don't just mean Denmark. I just mean also in a lot of areas in the West, because things have been good for them. So they imagine tech will actually disrupt things. But for India, we know things have kind of been bad. So tech is actually improving things. So that attitude towards it is totally different. So design does change, bro. And I think even when it comes to like small household objects and stuff, like Scandinavian design does have a very minimalist aesthetic. Everything is fucking beige or gray, right? All the houses here pretty much look exactly similar. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so
Very long rambling answer, but yeah.
it's okay.
It's like
We like that. So
Hmm.
okay, पहले ये question हो जाएगा कि like okay, the question is कि what design myth you have broken, like even in your 7 years, like you went with this axiom ki like, okay, this is how design will look like, but then it totally shifted when you started designing?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I've broken this, but one of them was just when I was designing for more of a US audience back in the day. My understanding was designers are not going to have a good time in India or designing for an Indian audience because just people don't understand. Right? I would just be like, bro, like back then designing for an Indian audience was a pain. It was just like, bro, like matlab inko kuch samajh mein nahi aata, you have to add all this, right? Or you have to think about Android. There's like 30 screen sizes. Versus in the US, you're 300 screen sizes. Let's just say the US, you're designing for iPhone. It's like 2 sizes. So my belief back then was, designing for Indian users not fun at all. Like, it's annoying. But now it's actually that has changed. Mostly because there's a lot more users now and people are way more tech savvy. But also India, it's now reached that maturity level where you're finding these interesting use cases, right? Like, and people are way more accepting. It's a big part of their life. Like one example that I love to use is Urban Clap. Like, imagine the experience of ordering a carpenter, house cleaning, AC repair, all of that in India. It was such a pain, dude. Like, मतलब कहाँ से ढूंढो? Just Dial पे call कर रहे हैं. मतलब you're asking your neighbors, do you
Just
know
Dial is still
somebody who
bad.
is
Just Dial is still bad.
yeah. And Just Dial was supposed to be like the solution, and it was so bad, right? And even then you would get really bad quality. But the challenge of designing a product where you can do that and where you can bring some kind of transparency, where you can bring some kind of trust that if this person is on this platform, they're probably going to be good, where you can close that loop where booked, showed up, you get a notification when they're showing up, this thing review is given, and then there's a follow-up, this kind of thing. Just like building all of these loops into technology in a predictable way to create this kind of seamless experience is not easy at all, and it's such a interesting design problem to work on, because you will come across all these things. Like, one thing I remember one of the designers of Urban Clap was talking about was they made a decision to add English to their app as a language, right? Instead of just Hindi. So they added English where everything became, in Hindi, but it's written in English. And they were like, this was so good for us because suddenly people were like, they were already talking like that on WhatsApp. And they suddenly were like, oh, fuck, kar sakte hain app se, and like whatever the metric they was tracking kind of shot up. So I think all these unique things, a designer who is not in India probably will find it very difficult to understand this kind of psychological, cultural, social norms. But being in India, seeing all this bad experiences that you've grown up with and having the opportunity to actually fix it is a very satisfying, gratifying experience. Yeah.
I won't be surprised कि like I won't be surprised अगर future में English blogs लिखने लग गए लोग. I really won't be surprised.
Yeah.
It will just be a thing.
It's
Actually, जो
weird that
मैंने
living in India kind of now seems like a perk, that you see problems and you're in the not so developed country, so you have more exposure to design.
actually
Yeah, bro. I mean, it is like that. In developed country, you don't feel like there's a problem because everything is great
Perfect.
infrastructure, there's no
It's
traffic. You're
perfect.
like, everything is fine. What do I need to change? Versus India, you're like, oh fuck, let's do something.
एक्चुअली जब मैंने अपने डिज़ाइनर दोस्त से भी ये सवाल पूछा था, आई थिंक मितेश ने पूछा था, मैंने शी ऑल्सो सेड द सेम थिंग कि लाइक यूज़र चोमू है, उसे नहीं पता कि क्या चाहिए, उसे पता ही
User
नहीं है
never
क्या
knows.
चाहिए. बट शी ऑल्सो सेड वन थिंग कि लाइक एवरीथिंग इज देयर फॉर अ रीज़न ऑन लाइक एन ऐप, एवरीथिंग इज देयर फॉर अ रीज़न, और जो रीज़न है वो यूज़र ही बता पाएगा. इज दैट अ ट्रू थिंग? कैन यू एक्सप्लेन इट अ बिट? क्योंकि मुझे प्रॉपर तरीके से नहीं समझा. आई हैव अ रफ आइडिया कि लाइक ओके दिस इज व्हाट शी मेंट. लाइक
I get what you mean. Like, even as a designer, right? Shuru mein, when you're a beginner, you feel this thing कि bro, like जैसे हम home page बना रहे हैं, like bro, Swiggy जैसा बना देते हैं, मतलब इसमें इतनी सोचने की क्या बात है, right? Or like the review screen, मतलब after you've booked an Uber and you're seeing the screen, or after you've placed an order, you're like, bro, isme kya baat hai? Matlab, it's pretty much the same. Hundreds of apps have this. It's a pattern. Let's just copy it.
Copy it.
And a lot of early stage, it does work like that sometimes for the first few versions of the app. But I think for design, when it starts being really interesting, is when you start zooming in and you realize that you can keep going, right? Matlab, the zoom level never ends. Like every single thing, like even a single button,
Can have so
or
many
not a
variations.
button, let's say a card, right? A card which shows your property details or something like that can be designed in 100 different ways.
Yep.
And so trying to discover what is the best way, of course, you won't get it right the first time, but then trying to get, you're working with product managers and they're giving you this additional data. How do you interpret it? What exactly we track? Like once you start getting into those depths, you realize that, dude, like you're basically designing a universe. Like there is so much here. Every single thing adds to every other thing. It's like if you've ever played, for example, Roller Coaster Tycoon or City Skyline or one of these games. It's like you realize that, like, for example, if you lay down your paths in a certain way and then you put your parks here, and then later you're like, oh fuck, like I shouldn't have done that and now I can't move this because of that.
Done.
Right? Like that deep level of system thinking when you sometimes feel in these games, because the decision that you took way back is now playing out in all these different ways. Like the same thing kind of happens in product design as well. Like a decision that you might have taken a couple of months back, you will see when it stops being a bad decision. And then you have to go in and you have to fix it. So the depths sometimes are very crazy. And sometimes it's also very annoying because a lot of these things don't matter, right? Whether it's a 2% bump here versus not, sometimes it honestly doesn't matter, right? It won't even affect the business in a lot of times. So just maintaining that sense of everything is important, and then also being able to prioritize and say, okay, fuck it, this is actually not important.
Not important.
Is interesting
It's
kind of mindset to be in.
I'm not a designer, so I don't think I will probably get it properly. But like, is it like building a house of cards? Okay, we have to be very careful about like what our floor is, because if we are top down there and there is something wrong
Or
with
maybe-
the first card, it's going to go down fully.
Or maybe more like chess, that the first step you take will affect the third step, and if you are here, you cannot go back now because you took that three steps before. Now you're stuck in this position. Now the opponent is here. Now you're fucked. So maybe design is like
It's
that.
similar, but basically in general you have to think about your second order and third order consequences.
Third order consequences.
And sometimes you can't, right? Sometimes you just can't anticipate what's going to happen. So, and you always have the option of starting over. Like you can always do a fresh redesign, but that's like the most expensive thing because it'll take you a month or two. It has to be developed all over again. Now people who've been using it, they're gonna shit on you saying, bro, pura UI change kar diya. And
I think that's it.
everything gets
Every app
reset.
design. Every app design. जब भी नई change आता है ना, like everyone is like अरे क्या बना दिया. Like Instagram had this a lot initially. Logo change कर दिया. Everyone shits like for a month. Then you're like हाँ ठीक है अच्छा था. It's actually good.
Yeah.
Got it. What do you have like made a list ki like, okay, like there is a difference in designing for Web 2 and Web 3, and there are like 5 points here. Like, can we like move over it like one by one?
Yeah, sure. If you have it open, you can just tell me.
Yeah. So the first was ki like Web 2 was not stimulating enough, and like people were committing to specializing early. Web 3 is different in that sense.
Yeah, I think for designers, the reason a lot of people who start in Web3 designing might not, I'm not saying they won't, but might not go into Web2 is because Web3 is so much more stimulating, right? Not only like being able to use real money as a variable in your apps in all of these interesting ways is very interesting. But for me, just the simple analogy is a lot of people who started getting into design when smartphones were taking off didn't really bother becoming really good at, let's say, web design or designing dashboards. Because they were like, dude, this is kind of taking off and I can just do this as a specialization. It's kind of similar with Web3. Again, we don't know. It's still too early. but that's what I feel. Yeah.
Okay, and designers through NFTs are getting a crash course on how market and supply demand pattern works.
Mm. This I think is one of the most interesting ones, because I feel like with just designing apps, a lot of times designers don't think about the business end of it. Right? They're like, I'm going to make the screens, which is one interface in your business. But thinking from that system level of supply and demand, you don't usually get to do that in design. Versus in Web3, you definitely do. Right? Even something as simple as, let's say, NFTs, you will have a fixed supply of your NFT, and you can see market dynamics play out in the products that you design, right? So it's just a additional level of complexity. It's almost like if you're playing a game, a new DLC has now dropped. Like, you can now design a lot more interesting stuff, which is markets. And I think the reason it's a crash course is because a lot of designers were attracted to NFTs, and just buying and selling an NFT, seeing when there is a supply, the floor price reaches a high, but then it kind of drops. You get to see exactly why, maybe not exactly, but you get to see where the supply is, or rather where the demand is. You get to see the floor price is going up because of, let's say, an announcement that's coming up. That is a deep psychological understanding. Like, you are seeing, just because of an announcement, a price goes up. You could have expected that, but to see it actually happen, and then you can actually take a decision to sell high, like, that kind of experience really changes you. And not just for designers, but for anybody, right? Being able to see human desire of
Play.
buying and selling playing out in the markets is a revelationary thing sometimes. Yeah.
From this whole discussion, I kind of get the vibe ki, like, for you to design properly, you need to have a lot of experiences, and especially with humans.
That is true, bro. I mean, it's not a prerequisite before you start, right? You can, of course, build this up on the way, but definitely it helps, because even in design, there are techniques where you can find all these things out, right? There's a lot of UX research techniques that you can do to get insights, run surveys, run sessions to figure it out. But just having that intuition for what people might like, how people might respond, very, very useful. Yeah.
So because like अभी मैंने देखा कि like the NFT thing and design is not like directly correlated. It's just you can observe the user like from a much closer place.
Yeah.
Okay, so now is like designers that previously stayed away from the market due to perception of finance plus quantitative are now thriving with the switch to culture plus qualitative. And this is like ज़्यादा हो गया मेरे लिए, मेरे को नहीं समझा.
In general, I think a lot of designers did not want to get into fintech, right? And I don't know, maybe that's just my experience, but they didn't want to get into fintech because they were like, bro, matlab, like, I'll give you an example. Let's say ClearTax as a company. I know designers who are like, bro, nahi, ClearTax mein to nahi kaam karna. Although the problems are very interesting, you're designing a very difficult thing and you're solving it for people. They're like, no, I don't want to think about finance on an everyday basis. And, government mein ye clause hai, IT 343 works this way and all that. I was like, I don't want to do that. So it was or designers who were even working in fintech in something which is like more, let's say, mutual funds and stocks and stuff. It was very qualitative. It's not relatable. It's nothing to do with design, culture, psychology, little bit, but it's very financial, right? And I don't think designers felt that attachment. But with NFTs, it's very cultural. It's very close, for example, NFTs to sneaker flipping, which is not really a thing in India as such. But US may, like, when there are sneakers and when there are these rare sneaker drops, you can actually line up in stores, buy it, and you can sell them on eBay for a much higher price. Now, not every sneaker performs well, but if you know there is a certain hype behind a sneaker, you can actually make money in that. So you are actually acting on a market in some ways. So I think from my experience, designers who got into Web3, they sort of started seeing more of this cultural aspect of things. So, for example, looking at ITC's stock value, might not be as interesting because you're like, it's just pure finance or something like that. But looking at a Bored Ape Yacht Club, looking at a picture of a monkey who's now suddenly worth this much, that is a way more interesting thing, right? As a designer, you're like, dude, I could have designed that. Now, what exactly gives it value? Like, that's a crazy rabbit hole. Yeah.
Got it. Like even with the like API thing, I was like, कुछ time पहले I think someone used that coin to like buy some burger or stuff like something like, and I was like 6 महीने पहले लोग इसका मजाक उड़ा रहे थे ये बंदर डीपी का.
Yep, yep.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, they changed. So
So that's more
if
interesting because it's so cultural, right? Which is all these people have now accepted that this picture of whatever a monkey has value, and that's a crazy thing. It's never happened in history, literally. So for a designer or even for a product manager or even for us, actually, we don't have to be designers. Very interesting thing to understand what exactly is going on there for that to be assigned.
Valued.
What are the technological reasons? What are the social and cultural reasons? Because it's not just pure trading or stocks. It's also culture, in the sense that people are like, it's a flex. It's a flex in the same way a Lambo on your whatever Instagram, this thing would be a flex, right? It's closer to fashion, where it's not immediately obvious why something is better or worse or has value, but there are social and cultural waves that you can kind of read.
So people, if I have to summarize it in one phrase, it's like people are not just there for design; they're here for the community, which is like the core of like whole Web3.
Yeah, community, and there's so many factors, and it's not immediately obvious because as a designer, very easy to just say, "Oh, my work is the screens," or "My work is the visuals that I create," right? And then they're like, "Yeah, the value is actually in the work that I do." But with NFTs, it's a very straightforward example that although that image might have taken you just 2 hours to create, once it's out there as an NFT, it has a life of its own. And how people respond to it, people's perceptions will actually change the value of your work. I don't think a lot of designers have kind of had a very direct experience with that kind of thing.
Even we don't understand like NFT in like that sense. We get ki, like why they have value, but it's still hard to comprehend ki, like okay, why people are buying this. Like okay, it has value, but like why?
I mean, so much value, like millions of dollars. You're talking, like not any value. Like it's like millions.
So
Do you?
next,
I had this one weird doubt that I think everyone on the, at least on Twitter or on the internet, speaks about Web3 is the future and all that jazz. Do you think there are some people who should stay away from Web3, like a certain type of thought process, or it could be a mentality that if you're someone like that, you should not get into Web3? What be like, who should not be into Web3 basically?
Yeah, I think Web3 at this point is a little bit for power users, right? Like, I would not try to get my mom to install MetaMask or try doing anything like that, because I'm like, bro, like it's not gonna be a good time, right? Let's just say that. Or it's the same as about 10 years ago, you would probably not want your parents to have a smartphone because you're like, dude, I don't want to explain it to them. Right? ये बहुत ही complicated है और वो 10 क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे जिसका आंसर है ही नहीं.
यूज करने नहीं आएगा.
Very crazy thing, right? Before streaming services, people are like, मेरे फोन पे गाने डाल दो, bro. They're like, मेरी ये list है, ये download. And now you have to go online, you have to go to songs.pk, you have to find all this. It'll take you 4 hours to do this. फिर iTunes से connect करो and वो connect नहीं हो रहा, firmware update करो. Like, such a process, right? And simple thing is, if you're not a technically savvy user, maybe it's not ready for you yet. It will become better, and every single day we move closer to that. But I think if you're not technically savvy, if you're not really in tech, it might be too early. But again, the reason why there's so much volatility and alpha, so to say, the reason you can make so much money is because most people are kind of staying out. Once everybody gets in, probably it's not going to be this volatile. Probably it's
going to stabilize.
Yeah. So if you're okay with risk, I think then definitely. If you're not okay with risk, no, absolutely not. Don't do it.
But with risk come the things which you talked about in your video, ki like your sense of reward to like effort ratio will like go haywire.
True, true. Huh? What the hoga, bro? Yeah. It's just,
Hmm.
I think if you, the risk exists in too many places. Let's just say that. Like for a average user, I would say a random person within our network, right, within people we know, they would probably get hacked within 1 week of joining Web3. Why? Because they're going to install MetaMask on their computer. They're going to have some weird browser extensions and stuff that is already there. Every new virus today, what it looks for is immediately to see if there's any seed phrases stored on your computer. And bro, they're going to get hacked like that, right? The attack surface is really, really high. Um, so that's why I think most people should not till technology kind of gets better. But risk to reward, yeah, I don't know. I think risk to reward thing kind of only kicks in when you are kind of you're spending all your time in Web3, which is the main thing I was talking about there was if you are so into Web3 or trading or not even Web3, let's just say crypto, where you're trading coins and stuff. Traders have a very different mindset from regular workers or somebody who runs a startup or somebody who's an employee. Right? It's just about making one or two great calls. So I think that's just it's a skill that you develop when you get into that kind of space. But yeah.
Okay. So the next point was in the Web 2 and Web 3 versus design. The scattered multi-project high information bandwidth style of Web 3 resembles that of indie agency and freelancing styles of past.
Yeah. Yeah, bro. This is a big one because a lot of designers I know don't work on one thing at a time. They work on multiple things. It's scattered, right? Especially if you're in an agency. If you're in a design agency, every couple of weeks you're working on a new client, right? You don't, disadvantage sometimes might be you don't get to go into depth on one particular product because you're working on new products, but it's a very scattered kind of environment. You're working on a lot of different things at once, and a lot of designers enjoy that because there's so much information to deal with. It's just way more stimulating and it just keeps you going. So Web3 is kind of like that. Like if you are designing for Web3, you're also probably holding some coins in your portfolio. You are also probably, your friends, your co-workers, colleagues in Web3 will probably tell you about a new NFT project that dropped. So of course, a lot of this shit is a distraction, but it's just way more stimulating of a work environment. And maybe that changes. Maybe that's just right now. But in general, designers and agencies are used to that scattered, multiple clients, multiple projects, multiple timelines kind of style of working. They're also used to freelancing. Like designers I know who are even in full-time roles usually freelance on the side, right? So they are very used to having multiple things going on and just working on them. So I think Web3, you have to be that kind of person. And Web3, you don't have a choice. You have to just be okay with all this shit happening, all this, being okay with market ups and downs, not letting that affect you. So very similar that way. Yeah.
Basically, you have to be comfortable with the chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the last point is like wealth creation previously was possible via ESOPs, is now democratized via tokens and NFTs.
I think this is a good one because with something like ESOPs, firstly, people didn't really understand it. Again, and also ESOPs was very limited of a thing. Now, of course, there are other things outside of ESOPs, like you could have always invested in stocks and stuff. I'm not really thinking too much of that. But just working in high tech, which is startups, ESOPs is kind of the main way where we kind of get rich, right? Your startup does well. It does really well. As an employee, as a founder, whatever, as investors, you increase the value of your startup, all of you get rich in the process. And then you guys become angel investors. You invest in the next set of startups. And that's how ecosystems like Silicon Valley, even Bangalore to some extent, have been sustaining. Web3 has that, right? Of course, Web3 companies also offer ESOPs, but they also offer tokens as part of this. And as a pure Web2 employee working in a startup, you cannot just say, I want the ESOPs of 2-3 different companies. You get ESOPs for the company that you
You're
work at.
working on.
Now, of course, you can invest in the public markets, but let's just say for high tech right now, that was the only option. With Web3, what I'm seeing is a lot of designers, of course, have, let's say, if they're working in a company, they have ESOPs or they have tokens in that company. So if you're working at Polygon, let's say, as part of your stock package, or rather your compensation, you'll get your salary plus you'll get some tokens. But now you can also say, I'm also on the side going to buy, let's say, Bored Ape. And then Bored Ape becomes crazy. And now you have a new type of wealth creation event that you participated in. Now, Bored Apes, Yuga Labs, they're pretty much a startup. And you cannot typically invest in startups at an early stage unless you're an angel investor. But in Web3, typically you can buy tokens, you can buy NFTs very early. So I kind of see NFTs also very similar to startup investing, which is you are looking at what value are they building. You are looking at where the momentum is going. And in general, that's my point that I was trying to make, which is as somebody in Web3, you can really diversify your bets in a lot of different early stage ventures.
Versus in Web2, yours, you had just one ESOP in the company you're working on. That's it.
Yeah,
Nothing else.
and you can invest in public markets, but
Public
then
markets.
that's totally different, right?
Different
That's
than
public
ESOP.
market doesn't have that kind of volatility or crazy growth potential.
So you can mitigate your risk even with a volatile market, basically.
Yeah, kind of.
It was great.
You can play your cards a lot better, I feel. You can I feel like NFTs are a crazy thing. I don't know if they'll stay this volatile, but I know a lot of designers who kind of bought a couple NFTs because it kind of looked good, or they were like, this has a good vibe to it, or they were like, this
Sexy lag raha
community is
hai.
interesting, kuch lag raha hai yahan pe. And then boom, NFT is now worth whatever multiples of what it was, and that is a crazy learning experience. But also, it's very similar to getting into a growth stage startup very early, and you get ESOPs as a result because you saw something that other people didn't.
Okay, so मैं कह रहा था कि like I don't think like these principles are only for designers. I think it's for a general
True.
person. It's not just for designers.
Yes. True. Yeah.
So Mitesh was asking like how many NFTs do you hold?
I own a lot, bro. Thing is, I would say the number is probably. See, again, a lot of times with NFTs, I don't even know if I should publicly share all this shit, but I'll just say it's a lot. And most of them don't have any value. For me, my relationship with NFTs, I put some money last year, mostly because I was like, this is the cost of learning, right? And this is one of the things with Web3, which is, of course, you can sit and you can observe and you can see, acha, price went up, price went down, or this is growing and this is falling. But actually putting some money, you learn a lot more because now you have skin in the game.
Yep.
You feel like a holder. So you also want to participate now, right? You want to get into the Discord, you want to talk, you want to do all this stuff. And you just get more serious. So for me, the reason I bought a lot of NFTs was it was just like, I was like, this money that I'm putting in, I might not ever see it again. But it's a cost of learning, right? NFTs for me, it was like a DLC pack to this design thing I was doing. I was like, fuck, a new expansion pack just dropped. And I know this is going to change things in some ways. So for me, it was just my price I was willing to pay to get that DLC before everybody else. Yeah.
I think the right way to end the podcast will be like, what can we expect in the next cohort? Anything new we can expect?
Yeah. Next cohort starts July 1st. So we're going to do this July, August, September. And I think we're planning to do one right after that as well. So we'll try to aim for 2 cohorts in 2022.
Okay.
The main thing for me is we're trying to just, as we've been growing these cohorts, we are trying to just focus mostly on operations and quality, which is, it's easy to say, oh, I have 5 designers and I'm going to teach them and do this. But real value is when you can do that for not 5 designers, but 50 designers, 100 designers, 200, 500, 1,000, 10,000, 10K designers. Right? But getting to that point is very difficult because you need to really dial in how feedback works. You need to really dial in where people are getting stuck. So I think my focus is just mostly kind of on the unsexy parts, mostly on the back end, making sure all the processes is right, the business is ready for growth. Yeah.
But like
On the public side, I don't think we'll have too many interesting announcements.
Don't you think it's counterintuitive? Because
Tell me
like,
more.
okay, so in a cohort, why a person goes in a cohort? Because they want that community. But if you're trying to scale it, then you are like away from the community in some sense. You're just a small part now. You're not a big piece in the whole pie. Don't you think it's counterintuitive to like scale it in some manner?
True. And I don't think we'll do 10,000 people cohorts for sure. Right. I think the point of a cohort is to have a limited group of people that go through from start to finish. And then there's another one that happens later. But one very interesting thing we found is let's say I'll give you an example. Our first 2 cohorts were around 30, 40 people with about, I think maybe 5, 6 mentors overall. The ones after that, cohort 3 and cohort 4 were about 100, 150 people. Right? Like the last cohort we did was about 180 people with around 60 mentors. Now, of course, it was very challenging to get to that number. But what we found was the experience was way better in a bigger cohort than a smaller one.
In what sense?
Counterintuitive, right? Very counterintuitive, right? You would imagine a 30-person cohort feels more cozy. You get more attention and all this stuff. But what we found was using instruction design in an interesting way. With bigger numbers, you actually get this feeling of you are in a party rather than you are in a classroom. Right? So we do a lot of stuff like, for example, every assignment that we do. Now, assignments are the main kind of test where you are directly working on a design problem. We actually create these pods. So we say we're going to have 2 mentors and 5 students, and you guys are almost like a team. You're individually working on the problem statement, but you're going to do this, and these pods get refreshed with every assignment that you do. So we're able to maintain that coziness in some ways, right? In the parts that really matter. But the overall events that we do, which is, or let's just say the core live sessions, those are engaging events. Like it's 150, 200 people on a call. They're professionally, we sort of prepare every single thing. It's almost like putting on a show, right? And it's not just me. Now I have a co-host, so to say, and we kind of have this on-stage chemistry where we say, okay, let's do this. Now let's bring people on. Let's do a breakout room where, we create now 50 rooms with 5 people each. We give them a specific prompt to work on. They come back and now we highlight one, we talk about that thing. So that kind of experience, way more engaging than a 30-person thing where you are more likely just sitting and watching Zoom, just more in a passive mode. So that's what we're doing. And I think my one inspiration is, I don't know if you've ever seen this, Tony Robbins, when he does his events, he does 10,000 people cohorts. Like today, he already does that.
Yeah.
And he literally stands in the middle of a round circular room with screens all around and literally 5,000 different people on that. And that kind of energy, of course, he's fucking Tony Robbins. Not everybody can do that. But he is literally able to create that experience with 5,000 people, which is way more engaging, right? And in the end, what do we want? We want, through this cohort, you meet new people, because that increases the chances that you find out which companies are good to work at. You're very likely that you'll find your team members who you're going to get an internship with right during the cohort itself, if the size is good. And with our mentors thing that we're doing is every cohort, the best people, or the people who have the, let's just say, the highest capacity, best outcomes, they return as mentors. So what we've been able to create is this kind of vehicle
Sustainable.
which kind of helps you find your space in the design industry. And it's not really just like a course kind of thing anymore. And the other thing we kind of want is the point that we're doing this live, it needs to be very, very, very different from watching Netflix, right? Netflix mode is when you're sitting passively, you're, making notes, if at all, but you're just like, yeah, that's going to happen. But an active state is when you know there is something happening. It's so stimulating. It's happening in the moment. It won't be the same when you watch the replay.
It's not.
And at any time you might be asked to participate. Now, of course, for introverts, I know exactly how that feels, right? I was an introvert myself. But there are ways through instruction design, or let's just say overall UX design, where you can actually solve for these problems. So what's very interesting to me now is this UX, or let's just say experience design that I was using for apps. I can now do it to create this 3-month experience. And I think we've barely begin to scratch the surface. Like we're getting there, but I think there's a lot more that can be done.
Would you start a like offline school someday?
No, bro, I don't think so. Difficulty is that I kind of feel like I wouldn't want to commit to being in one place, just like that. But I think online just comes with its trade-offs, but it's just way better. So what we'll likely do is most of it offline, or rather online, and we're going to do a lot of offline elements. So the previous cohorts were kind of during COVID, so we didn't explore too much on that. But this time around, we're planning to have some kind of weekly or monthly events. Like at the end of the cohort, we will probably have a huge graduation party, right? Book out an
That would
entire
be
place.
Graduation
Do
party.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. And every week we might do, like, now that we have alumni mentors, we pretty much have a group of people in every major
Every
Indian
city.
city. So what we're going to do is we're going to try doing some kind of weekend sessions where it's not really teaching as such, right? They're not going to come and teach, but it's just going to be a social event where you get to talk, you get to just feel that community experience. It might just be, a meetup at Starbucks in Bangalore or whatever. But I think that kind of thing where you are expected to participate, and it's not Netflix mode where, you're just sitting, can be, that Netflix mode can be broken in a lot of different ways. So for me, it's very interesting to figure out what are these ways of engagement that that create a great experience. Overall, for me, this is still experience design.
That can
And
be seen in.
the simpler thing is just looking at, are people getting an outcome at the end of it, right? All of this is great, and you can go so deep, but in the end, people need to get an outcome. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. And I think we've been able to consistently keep that up. Yeah.
I think I sort of learned from you, like even from your streams, it seems like you're not trying to build a video. You're not trying to make a video. You're trying to build an experience rather than a video.
True. Yeah. I think design forces you to think that way, right? Because one thing that designers immediately realize is it's not about the UI, it's about the UX. Right? That's a very early realization that designers have. But then thinking about something as an experience makes you really think about it in a more holistic way, right? Like if you're designing a screen for, let's say, Swiggy riders to pick up food, the screen might be pretty straightforward. But thinking about the whole experience of when they get the notification, are they going to be on a bike when they get the notification? Do they have earphones plugged in? What if there are 5 of them? What if there are 10 of them? What if your screen brightness is low? What if they're wearing, what if they have a cracked screen protector? When they walk in, what if there's another queue there? What happens? Like thinking in terms of the experience is how great products really happen. Yeah.
Any questions, Mitesh? मेरा तो हो गया.
I just want to know, what does Abhinav do when he's not talking about Web3 or design? Like, what does he do to chill out?
Or eating bhel.
Yeah.
Or eating bhel.
Yeah. It's a good question, bro. These days I've just been working out a lot. So that's kind of my thing. Although I kind of consider that part of work itself, because a lot of times I don't feel like doing it, but I know it's more of a consistent thing that I have to do. Other than that, I am these days traveling quite a bit. So like
Okay.
later this month, I'm going to be going to New York.
Oh, nice.
Going to be meeting Prakhar. Going to be meeting a lot of my
I
other
was
friends
like,
there.
next date cast.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. And one of our the host who does it with me, Jenny, he lives in
Daniel.
Dallas. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be going there. We're going to be spending a few days in Dallas, figuring out each session, what are our prompts, what do we want the emotional arc to be, just planning the whole thing out. I think I'm going to do that for the second half of June and then back. But for fun, I don't know, bro. I am mostly work. Yeah.
Or maybe more experiments. You're just running experiments. You're doing something
Yeah.
or the other as an experiment.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of fun, bro. It's not like that. Like, I am also looking forward to actually getting summer over here because, dude, it's still fucking 12 degrees. So when it gets to 20, I know I can go do a lot of swimming. So that's something I'm looking forward to. But I think for me, fun these days is mostly just social stuff. So just meeting people, connecting with new people, talking to them about stuff. By myself, my fun is pretty much limited to just watching YouTube or TikTok every once in a while, or just focusing on something which helps me in my work.
At least you can watch TikTok.
Yeah, true.